and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 246th take, live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star Studios of Azle, Texas. I'm your host, Barry Duplessis, as always, and I'm so proud, so pleased, and so privileged to be with you all tonight. This is going to be a fantastic show. I've been so longing and so looking forward to this conversation for such a long time. It's taken 246 takes to make it happen, but it is going to be well worth it, and it has been well worth it for me, and I know it's going to be well worth it for you all. So thanks for tuning in. We're going to have a great conversation, but before we get to formal introductions of the guests of honor tonight, we do have to thank the people that make this show possible, and if this, of course, is sponsored by our key sponsors, and tonight's show is sponsored by Drew Estate. Drew Estate has done it again with the Girl with No Name. The Robusto Extra comes from the Deadwood Tobacco Company by Drew Estate, coming to Famous Smoke Shop. Yes, the regular lineup of Deadwood Tobacco Company by Drew Estate includes Fat Bottom Betty, Sweet Jane, Crazy Alice, and Leather Rose, but Deadwood, the Girl with No Name, Robusto Extra is part of Drew Estate's lineup of limited edition cigars that the company makes exclusively for particular cigar retail shops. In this case, Famous Smoke Shop will have and be the home for the Girl with No Name. There's something very strange about Deadwood's The Girl with No Name, explains Vaughn Boyd, the founder of Deadwood Tobacco Company, who partnered with Drew Estate to interpret the notorious Deadwood lady's sultry tales through the world of cigars. She is a yummy vixen who's appeared out of nowhere to join her Deadwood sisters and is now on the run. Only a posse of the boldest and most daring desperados have a chance to rope her in. So check out Famous Smoke Shop for The Girl with No Name from Deadwood Tobacco Company, partnered with Drew Estate. And welcome, everyone. Tonight's take is sponsored, of course. Tonight's guest, of course, is sponsored by United Cigars. Smoke one today and start living united. Yes, it's Mr. Jon Huber of Crowned Heads. Jon, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, Bear. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I am doing absolutely fantastic. I had a couple flubs there in the intro, but I think it's because I got all the nervousness out of the way, so it's fine. So I'm good. I'm good now.
Nothing to be nervous about. You got 245 under your belt, so I mean, you're a pro at this.
Yeah, now into 246, and I was telling you before we kind of got started here, and then of course a lot of people who know me have been know how much I've been looking forward to this conversation for such a long time. I had the opportunity to interview for the very first time a couple years ago at PCA, and that was a real privilege and honor for me. And so for you to take time out of your day and come onto my show, I really do appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Truth be told, you're taking time out for me because typically, like, I'm just not available after hours. So I sincerely appreciate you making the time for me to shoot this today. So I've been looking forward to this as well. I think it's long overdue. So I'm excited for our conversation.
Absolutely. So I like to get things kicked off with an icebreaker of sorts, but while we're kind of pondering over that question, I do have a tradition here on ELOSOFUMARTAKES where I actually give my guest the opportunity to choose my cigar for me. And so I have some choices for you. And I've got some aged gems as well as some hot newness as well. And I think you'll be a fan of all of them. So that's a good thing.
Let's go.
So let's start with the newest of the new. We've got the Le Patissier excuse me, I'm gonna butcher that. Canazo. I've never been able to do that name. That's terrible. This is the new one from, of course, your new friends at Noxa, new factory.
Fabulous.
You're partnering with, which we'll be talking about here shortly as well. Speaking of delicious and tasty treats, I've got the Le Crème Bellicoso Finos, the limited edition 2022.
Lovely.
If you're feeling like giving me a kick, I've got the Four. Yes, I'm going to be punny today. Four Kicks, the limited edition Mule Kick, the 2022 edition as well. But for the vault, I opened up. I actually had a couple of choices here. This was from December of 2015. The La Imperiosa Magicos.
Wow, look at the cello on that thing.
Yeah, if you choose that,
completely
I'll pull it
yellow.
off. But speaking of yellow, I've got another one too as well. I believe it's a little faded now.
I'm going to guess it's Yellow Rose.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
4/15 from April. It looks like a 4, so I'm going to say so. April 2015. So it's 8 years old. Yeah, 8 years of age. So, like I said, pull back the curtain a little.
So to me, the one that stands out because it's not like the others would be the Le Patissier because it's newer and you could save the vintage selection for a later time, or maybe you'll go into two cigars. So why don't we shoot with the Le Patissier Canonazzo
Okay,
from Naxa?
sounds good. I had I've of course smoked the original release from 2 years ago, and then I have not had I had just had the when we went to the Great Smoke a couple weeks ago, the opportunity to smoke the new one from the Noxa factory, and I was very, very pleased. So I'm really excited that you chose this. I'm going to be cutting this up and open it up here and lighting it. So while we kind of get started here, Jon and I take care of this. What kind of I know you, like you said, you kind of don't smoke things with the band on it too much anymore. You're always, you know, checking on the status of projects and things like that. That's where most manufacturers spend their time and their day smoking and everything.
Right.
But what kind of cut do you prefer on a cigar if you actually do use a cutter? Because I know you probably don't, like most manufacturers.
I do use a cutter.
Oh, you do? Okay, all right.
Oh yeah. I mean, if I have it at my disposal, I'll use a cutter. Up until about a month or two ago, I was using a Zycar, just like everybody else, and then I got in contact with Lefine Lam, and they were kind enough to send me one of their cutters, and I've been hooked on that ever since. So I've been using Lefine Lam on my cigars, and it's perfect. It gives a nice broad cross section, doesn't damage the wrapper. It's the blade is very sharp, and that's what I've been using.
I've been really impressed with that
said, the antithesis is my lighter. So
the good old Bic,
old school. Yes, sir.
It does the trick. It's fire.
You don't have to fill it up.
That's true. I'm using a lighter right now, but I typically do a match. I'm very old school as well. I don't know. I've just kind of enjoyed lighting cigars with matches for the last few years.
I'll tell you, my perception with accessories completely changed. Like back in the late '90s when I first started visiting the factories, and I remember sitting across from Nestor Plasencia one time, and I noticed that all he did was pinch the head, and then he got a Bic and he lit it, and I noticed all these guys started doing this like this, and like Ernie was the same way, Ernesto Perez Carrillo, and I was like, if these icons are going to be using a Bic, who am I to like bust out like a torch, triple flame, that. So it's good enough for them. It's good enough for me. So I've always been a Bic or a Jeep guy ever since then.
Indeed. I think it's for a long time. I think it was more about speed for me, just being able to light it. But then I started actually using the torch to just cool light my cigars. I wouldn't even use my mouth. I would just light the foot until it actually caught. I did that for a while too.
Just toast it a little bit.
But
once in a while, I use these. If somebody fills them up for me, I mean, we do these all the time with in stores and stuff. And actually, somebody did fill this one up, so I'll use this one until it runs out of gas, and then I'll go back to the Bic. So
those are great travel
pretty boring
for sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
Perfect. So, last couple of last minute icebreakers here too. Like, so you commented before we got kicked off here about my hat, which is one of my favorites. It's not the original Crowned Heads hat that I got. The very first one I got, and I tell the story all the time. He's so sick of me saying this. If he ever ends up when he ends up watching this, because I know he will, is your man Brian McGee gave me a La Imperiosa hat, and that actually fit my huge dome of a head. And I tell this story all the time.
What size fitted? What size fitted?
This is a 7 5/8, and I'll wear 7 5/8 or 7 3/4.
Oh, that's not huge.
Yeah, I mean it's not an 8. Yeah, for anything. I'm not Kevin Mensch or anything, but yeah, it's
I'm a 7.5. So,
but what are you sporting today on your hat?
My hat?
Yes, sir.
Oh, this is Ebbets Field Flannels, 1946 Paris Red Peppers, I believe. Nice. I love Ebbets hats. They make outstanding products, and it's been kind of a bucket list check off thing for me to be able to do. I think we've done 4 or 5 collaborations now with Ebbets Field Flannels, so it's been fun.
Yeah, our good your good cohort and my good friend Miguel Shadell was the one who introduced me to Ebbets Field Flannels, and I love their stuff too. I've got some of the hats that you've made, but I've also gotten like I have the Montreal Royals hat, the Jackie Robinson And then I also have the Vancouver Mounties. I really liked that logo as well. And then I've got probably way too many of their shirts, but it's a great company.
I probably have maybe 18 of their hats, aside from the 4 or 5 that we've done together. So yeah, they're great. I've been a fan of theirs since, God, I think that they've been in existence since '88 or something. So I've been a long time admirer of Jerry Cohn and everything that they've done there. It's amazing. They've really blown up.
And you're friends with the folks over at New Era too. That's how these came to fruition as well, right?
Yeah. Actually, Dave Eichinger is a longtime friend of mine. He's I don't know what his official title is. I kind of tell him that he's our sports marketing guy. That's kind of inside joke, but Dave is the guy that if you watch the World Series, the Super Bowl, whatever, whoever's they're handing out hats, that's Dave. Dave knows everybody's fitted hat size. He makes sure they have the right stock hats and this and that and the other. And he's at the NFL draft. He's at all the stuff that New Era is involved with. And I've known Dave since the CAO days, and we've continued to be friends over the years. And so, yeah, that's how that whole collaboration came into fruition. Is that connection there? So,
yeah, I love.
He's a big cigar guy too.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I was going to ask if it was a mutual exchange of sorts.
Yeah, definitely.
Or,
we have a mutual scholarship program, basically.
I'm obsessed with hats. Always have been. I think you know that about me too. Miguel and I have always talked about this too. I've worn hats for as long as I can remember. I mean, ever since I was a kid, my parents put me in hats before I could even do it myself, and I've just always worn them. Just always worn them, and I love them.
Yeah, same here. I've been collecting since I was a kid. You know, I've always loved hats. And somebody asked me what would I be doing if I wasn't doing cigars, and it probably would be headwear. I'd probably have a hat company or something. Which, to plug Miguel's hat company, I don't know if you know, but
yeah, the Herencia 21. Oh, it's beautiful.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Send me a couple. Actually, I plugged them on a couple of our Instagrams, and great product. It's fantastic.
Which ones have you rocked? I've missed this video.
He gave me the all black Mexico and Cuba.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, he did it right. He's a big hat guy too, so he knows make sure to get the green under, the nice, everything's custom. It's really a nice product. It's fantastic.
I recently put in my first order. I couldn't decide. And I couldn't get all of them.
They're all good. They're all
good. I know. I couldn't decide.
They're all fucking good. That's what I mean. Exactly. So yeah, no, I'm happy for him. It's pretty cool.
Well, that will get us into tonight's major point, which is always brought to you by the people. Yes, cigar people. It's the people who know everything about a lifetime of service. Protocol Cigars is more than just pool parties and good times. Well, maybe it is. But behind the Hunt Fund is a motivation for service, a motivation for giving back. From the original Protocol Blue to the latest release in the Lawman series, Bass Reeves, Protocol has always been about honor, passion, and yes, the people. It's what their life's work has been and always will be about. Power of the P, Protocol Cigars. So, Jon, just going into tonight's major point, I wanted to really take this opportunity to take a deep dive into your journey. And I mean, it's been an incredible ride, so to speak, and you've done so much in your career. I'm going to frame this question probably a little bit differently than you may have imagined it ever asked before. But how does one go from being a shipping manager at a cigar company to being known as one of the creative geniuses in the cigar industry? And I know you probably wouldn't put it away that way. I would. So when it comes to how does that happen?
That's pretty kind. I don't know. That's a bold statement. For me, it just happened with, just having a lot of luck and hard work, and just really loving what you do. And if you love what you do, you're going to put it in the hours. And if you put in the hours, you're ultimately probably going to be decent at it. And so when luck meets opportunity, that's pretty much what happened in my case. I mean, even when I was at CAO, I had no aspirations of ever having my own brand or anything. That wasn't even in my radar. But when the opportunity came about, I jumped in with both feet. And here we are 11 years later. So it was, I mean, that's kind of dumbing it down a little bit, but there's a lot of hard work that goes into it for sure. There's no question. It's one thing to be given the opportunity. It's another to actually make it work, to grow it, to have the sustainability. A lot of brands, a lot of companies come and go. It's not an easy task. And it's yeah, like I tell my wife, it's not as easy as it looks, because sometimes I don't think she thinks that I work for a living, but it's a lot of work. There's no question. Yeah.
I mean, without question, hard work has probably been a part of you for as long as you can remember. And I mean, let's take it back even a step further. I mean, you're like, I mean, Nashville's been home for you for so long that, I mean, you probably feel like a Tennessean, but I knew you were born in San Francisco, right? And you grew up in California.
Correct.
So what kind of, what catapulted you to change scenery to the south, so to speak? I mean, that's got to be a huge change for a California boy at the time.
Oh God, yeah, it was, man. I equated to being in a car and going from like fourth gear to first gear without downshifting. It was just like, whoa. Yeah, San Francisco till I was 17. I moved out of San Francisco, went down to LA, lived in LA for like a dozen years, and then relocated to Nashville. I mean, the catapult to get out of LA was just because I had burned out on LA so bad. I was just, it's just it's a tough place. It really is. It's fun. I don't regret it, but I needed a change of scenery, and one thing led to another. And once I got to Nashville, I was like, okay, now what? What am I going to do? And it was very serendipitous the way it all kind of happened, because I mean, I've told the story 100 times, but I walked into a cigar store to buy cigars as a gift to take back to California for Thanksgiving. And as soon as I walked into this store, like the smell of the cedar and the cigar, the tobacco and everything, I was just like, whoa. I was just like, it was like an epiphany. I'm like, this is what I want to do. And like, I couldn't wait to come back and like start that whole exploration, that whole journey of cigars. And so I picked up a Cigar Aficionado magazine, started reading, got my little notebook, started taking, tasting notes, putting the bands in the books and this and that, like everybody else. And
sounds like me in college.
A lot of self-education. Yeah, man, that was what I was doing. And I was just like, well, how do I get my foot in the door? And instantly enough, this is again before the days of like social media and all that. You literally, it was a lot more challenging to get in the door. So I was like writing letters to every single company I could find in the magazine, including Cigar Aficionado magazine. I wrote a letter, I'll never forget, to Gordon Mott, who was the senior editor at the time. Everybody knows who Gordon is. And he was kind enough to actually send me a very nice, polite rejection letter. And, but I mean, I you know what I mean? I was trying everything. And so most of the companies never even got back to me. I tried to get a job at the store where I bought the cigars, and they wouldn't hire me for $7 an hour as a clerk. They're like, no, we don't need you. I'm like, okay. And then I remember discovering CAO was in my backyard. And I was like, I saw the last page in that book, 830 Kendall Drive, Nashville, Tennessee. I'm like, whoa, there's a cigar company that's here. So I cold called them, and then, found out the owner's name, Jon Ozgener, rest in peace, and sent Jon a letter and heard nothing for like 4 months. And I totally forgot about everything. And then one day I got a phone call, and it was Jon asking me to come in and for an interview. And that's really how it started. And fortunately, he took a chance on me. He says, I just need a shipping manager. Really, we're just getting started. And I'm like, oh, I'll be the best shipping manager ever. And I just did anything and everything to finagle my way in the door. And he gave me a shot. Did you know anything
about shipping at that time?
Zero. Nothing. I knew nothing about logistics, shipping, nothing. And that lasted about 5 months. So, but fortunately, a lot of opportunities came in at the right time, the right place. I remember what the real start was. I was listening to a local rock format radio station back in the day, and it was 103.3, I think, KDF. And they were doing a promo on the radio, and they were giving away 2 tickets to a closed circuit prize fight and a box of cigars. And it was like, ding. And innocently enough, I pick up the phone, I call the station, I say, hey, I just heard your promo. you're going to do cigars. Where are you getting these cigars? Like, we don't know. But we just thought it'd be kind of cool, boxing cigars is kind of a guy's thing. And I'm like, well, I got a proposition for you. If I get you 2 boxes of cigars, retail value of X, give me a couple of spots on an ad on there and promote CAO, this company I'm working for. And I said, okay. So I did that and I recorded it. And then I called the station back and I said, hey, cigars are kind of a thing right now. Maybe you need somebody to come in and just do like a cigar show. And ironically, they just said, okay. So I went in there for like about a month, once a week during drive time. And I did this cigar show thing before I went to CAO. And then I'd go to CAO and work. So at the end of this all, like 4-6 week period, I come in with these cassette tapes. This was on cassette. I play it for Jono and he listens and he's like, this guy's pretty good. Who is this guy? I said, this is me. I've been doing this, behind the scenes. Fantastic. You're now the director of promotions and public relations. You were a terrible shipping manager. I said, okay, great. So that was it. So I was off to the races and I was handling like PR and marketing for CAO back in there. So that's my stint as a shipping manager lasted about 5 months. And then I was promoted, so to speak.
It's pretty awesome. I love hearing about the just the some of those things that are in there. I think there's a couple things I want to go back to. So your time in LA and everything. I mean, so this was, I guess, prior to cigars. So there's probably you never ran into Pete Johnson or anything at that point when you're in your time in LA.
No, the first time I met Pete was actually in Cincinnati at what was the RTDA, which is now known as the PCA. I just started with CAO like in April, and so by whatever that month was, July or some couple months later, whatever, I was at this trade show, and I'm like, you trial by fire. They just Jonah just threw us into this whole thing, and I saw Pete, and we each had, back then nobody had tattoos, right? So I had a couple of tattoos that were visible. He did, and it was just kind of one of these things like, hey, what's up, And then we just became fast friends. He's like, oh, I'm in LA. I'm managing Grand Havana. I'm like, well, shoot, I used to live in LA and da 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 da. And so we had a lot of commonality there, and we just became friends right away. From '96 on. So and we still are. So. But to answer your question, I didn't know Pete when I was living in LA. I wasn't into cigars really at that time. And then once I got to Nashville, then when I would go back to LA, I would go to like Cigar Warehouse in Sherman Oaks, and I would buy, Bahia and all this other stuff. And I was geeking out on all that. But yeah, so interesting.
Bahia is one of those names that I hear constantly from people who were in the industry, quote unquote, back in the day.
Yeah.
And that's still one of the most tragic stories, I feel like. And there's been a lot of them. There's been a lot of tragic stories in the cigar industry.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the one that always kind of gets brought up by people. And because you didn't even talk about the story, you just mentioned the cigars. I think that the cigars spoke for themselves, and it was kind of just like one of those things that just like, oh gosh, that's just awful. But
I'll be honest with you. If you weren't in the industry at that time, I cannot adequately convey the level of like celebrity or whatever that Tony Barani and Bahia had back then. It was unlike anything today. And I'm being serious about that. Like, you would go to a trade show, let's say 98, right? And you couldn't even get within 10 feet of Tony's booth. There were just lines of people around his booth. Like, it was like Jesus walked into the room. I mean, it was incredible. And he just had that cachet, and that brand was amazing. And I mean, they, obviously it didn't end up where we all thought it would, but I mean, to this day, a Bahia Gold Robusto in 1998 was one of the standout cigars in my memory that I've ever smoked. It's just an incredible product.
I smoked Bahia when I first started, and so I've had the opportunity to smoke, and it was great from what I remember. And I wish I'd been around to kind of experience it at that level that everyone talks about. It was almost like with the reference.
It was something different. Yeah. I mean, I've done that trade show every year pretty much since '96, and I've never seen anything like the buzz that was Bahia or that was Tony. Tony was like on a whole different level, man. You couldn't even get close to his booth. It was insane. It was crazy.
The other thing I was going to mention too, like you mentioned about how you like wrote a letter to Gordon Mott, for example, and all these other great things.
Yeah.
You strike me, because of your love for all things vintage and history and just of such inquisitive taste and everything. Are you much of nostalgia? Did you keep any of these letters? Was that you hear about people who keep letters like this to kind of like fuel the fire a little bit? Did you keep any of those?
I wish I would have, but I didn't. I don't hold on to a lot of stuff. Like, like I remember the last day at CAO, in fact, um, I literally just closed the door on that chapter. So I took everything that related to that chapter and I just got a big dumpster and just every article, every press clipping, every this, that, and the other. Okay, next. I walked out the door. So no, I didn't hang on to any of that stuff.
Yeah,
No.
but I think one of the I keep everything. It's much to my wife's dismay.
I kind of wish I did, but I didn't. So
again,
I keep other stuff that's sentimental, but not business related stuff.
Yeah. I know you're a parent too, so I know you probably have a bunch of your kids stuff just around like drawings and things like that.
Yeah. If I turn this computer around, you would see the entire office is decorated with my daughter's artwork and my son's artwork, and so yeah, I'm sentimental with that kind of thing, and yeah. But I don't keep those.
I've knew like I haven't I don't know you as well as I've known some other the people in the industry, Jon, and some of your coworkers actually, which we'll get to here in just a little bit. But I have been obviously an observer afar, and I said this to Matt Booth and Nick Perdomo recently for a different reason. Nick Perdomo became a recent grandfather in the last couple of years, and Matt and I have kids about the same age, so our his kid and my oldest are about the same age, and so I told Nick that grandfather looks great on him, fathering looks great on Matt, and from what I've always observed from you, Jon, like fatherhood just looks like it fits you like a glove. Just it just.
Oh, thank you, man. That's a compliment. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, it's my real job. Like my real job is husband, father, and then this is my day job kind of thing. But I try to keep it in perspective and what's really important at the end of the day.
Absolutely. To go back again one more time to the cigar aficionado piece, so you said you remember picking it up when you were first getting into cigars. Have you ever reflected back on that? I mean, you've had several top 25 cigars for them. I mean, that's got to be a huge. I know that's a huge honor for you. I mean, has it ever kind of struck you as like, wow, I was reading this magazine and now my cigars are being heralded as some of the best of the year by them?
No, not so much, really, to be honest with you. What does impact me is like just like like working with somebody like Ernesto, and I shared this with him, not too long ago, and I was like, I remember reading about you when I was coming up and before I even got in the industry about him selling La Gloria Cubana, and he was like always like, I was like, wow, like he's like one of my heroes kind of thing, and then being able to text him back and forth about blends and working with him, that's kind of like a pinch me moment, right? That kind of resonates more than the top 25 stuff. I mean, that's not really that big of a deal to me at the end of the day. I mean, I'm grateful for the recognition from CA, but that's not really what drives me, to be honest. But it's the people in the business that do.
That would be for me too. I've had the opportunity to meet Ernesto. That was one of those pinch me moments too. And my good friend and partner, Cigar Coop, who you know as well, on Cigar Coop Prime Time Special. He calls them bear moments when I have these kind of moments where with people that I've always wanted to meet and have conversations with. And for you mentioned, and I know how much we've mentioned the term reverence in terms of Tony, but I mean I know the incredible love and respect and reverence that you have for the Ozgener family and the opportunity that they gave you. What he took a chance on you. Obviously, you have probably had a wonderful loyalty to him for that. But like, how did it morph from employer-employee relationship to the bond to where, I don't know, it feels like, you and Tim are extended family, or we're maybe not even extended family, more like close-knit family now. It's like you guys are adopted into each other's clan, so to speak. How did that
Well, I
happen?
mean, I've known, Tim and his family's longer than, I've known anything. I mean, they've been with me since day one. So it's just, God, it was just, CAO was such a different experience, really. It was not like a job. It was like you were a part of an extended family. We spent so much time together building that and had so much fun together building that those bonds never get broken. Even when Tim took off for a dozen years and was doing Oz Arts, I mean, it's just when he came back last year, it was like, nothing ever changed, really, to be honest. You just have so much in the memory bank that just, that never goes away. And it's just, it was a really special time. It's like I tell people, CAO was like my undergrad degree and Crown Heads was like my graduate degree in the business. But I mean, where did I have more fun? Probably at CAO, because it was like, we just loved doing what we did. And we were all like all the reps and everybody that worked together. We were all like, it was like a fraternity, we just had so much fun together and some of the best days of my life, really. And then once it shifted to become Crown Heads and Mike and I went off on our own and started this thing, it was a different thing. It was great. I loved the opportunity, but it was also a lot more pressure because at CAO, as long as you did your job and you were good at it, you got paid, and that was it. Now in this new place, it's like, well, it's not new anymore, but in this circumstance of being a business owner or co-owner, you have that pressure to create constantly, and you have this pressure to not only provide for your family, but for the families of all your employees and everybody else. So it's a whole different dynamic. It's one of those be careful what you wish for because you might get it kind of a thing. There's a lot of pressure to it that never really goes away. And even when you're doing good, it's like you're always waiting for the other foot to drop. Like, okay, we're doing good, but so it's. I mean, I wouldn't trade it, but CAO was just a very special time. I will say that.
You seem like you do put a lot of pressure on yourself, in a good way, right? I feel like you're always working and always building, like we've kind of alluded to a little bit in this conversation. I'm going to step off camera. I need to grab a water for a second, so I'm here. But I wanted to start with this question. Talk to me about the sale. So in December, I believe it was December 2010 was when was your last day. The sale took place before that, obviously, but I believe the last day at CAO for you was December of 2010. And then November of 2011, so almost a year later, was when the first Crowned Heads cigars actually shipped.
Correct.
I mean, was that an emotional time for you, or was that just like were you full force ahead, like all steam, all engines go? I can't even think of a good metaphor here, Jon. Were you just focused on the next thing with Mike, which we'll get to your relationship with Mike here in a second.
Sure. Yeah, no, it was definitely like I was focused completely on what's ahead. I mean, I just really stepped aside from, like I said, metaphorically and realistically, I put everything in a dumpster and said, okay, that chapter is closed. Now I'm going on with Crown Heads, and it became all systems go on Crown Heads. And so my focus was entirely on creating and the future and how we're going to build this thing. And it was just a matter of really closing that chapter of CAO and then starting the new chapter of Crown Heads. 100%. There was I didn't have any misgivings or anything about, what happened at CAO. It's like, Ozgener family got paid. Good for them. They deserved it, and I was like, okay, on to the next one, basically. So
I have this theory that, and you don't have to confirm or deny it either way, but I have this theory that Jon Huber might be the very big reason why NDAs exist in the cigar industry. Because you had such a great turnaround of success. Because you had such a great turnaround of success that I'm sure in hindsight, the parent company who bought CAO would have thought, man, maybe we should have locked this guy down a little bit.
I'm glad they didn't, to be honest with you.
Of course,
You
yeah,
know,
me too.
they never asked me to. I remember the gentleman that did the exit interview at CAO offered some of us positions, and it was very informal. It was like, hey, you know, Richmond's a great place to live. You want to come work? And I'm like, no. Well, give us some time. Think about it. I'm like, no, I'm done. All right. Thank you. I'm done. And that was about as detailed as it got. And there was some requirements that we had to do over the, you know, next 10 months or whatever in order to get our severance pay. And once we met all those requirements, we were able to leave in December. So 2010 was pretty much, it was like an F off year for us. It was just like, okay, we knew the doors were closing. You know, let's just have a good time on the way out. It was kind of like you're on the Titanic and you can, let's have some drinks and play the violin because the ship is sinking. So that was the mentality of the entire year. And then we started the ground running. Like 4 days later, Mike, after I left the building, Mike and I had our first meetings. It was like, I think our last day was the December 17th, I think, or the 10th or something like that. And 4 days later, we were having meetings about what would become Crown Heads. So yeah, we were off to the races. So that was good.
I know Mike's always kind of been in the behind the scenes type and everything. I had the good fortune of meeting him a few trade shows ago as well. And I think I may have shared the story with you before, so I apologize for repeating myself a couple of times here. But I still find it a little bit of comic relief because, like I said, I've been an observer of you from afar for quite some time. A huge fan of Crowned Heads and CAO for years. And when I knew that John Huber and Mike Condor partnered to form Crowned Heads. That was the extent of my knowledge, and I knew who you were, and I knew what you looked like. We talked about the tattoos and everything earlier. I had this vision of Mike Condor, and when I met Mike Condor, he was nothing like that vision whatsoever. And
yeah,
I was really kind of taken aback.
We're like the odd couple.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're definitely the odd couple for sure, no question. But no, I mean, Mike came on to CAO as a consultant initially back in the early 2000s, and then eventually became full time. And then when we were acquired by Henry Winterman's, there was a restructuring, and the restructuring was that Mike would be in charge of the marketing department. So he then became my boss. And so, and which I was elated with because I had a great friendly relationship with Mike. We always got on, even though we're polar opposites appearance wise, we always got on really well. And I respected his business acumen, and I knew I could learn a lot from him. So I was like tickled. They were like, you know, hey, Mike's your new boss. You have a problem with that? I'm like, no, not at all. Let's go, you know. And we had a good run at it. And then, you know, when we knew the end was near, basically, you know, I really, a lot of people speculated what I was going to do, and I really didn't know what I was going to do. My only focus was, I always have this saying of, you know, ride the wave all the way to the shore, like, you know, finish what you started. So I'm just going to, everything else will take care of itself. I'll figure it out. And innocently enough, I did. And Mike just kind of approached me very, you know, casually, like, hey, you know, when this is done, do you want to do something? I'm like, yeah, okay. And that was as formalized as it got. And then it, of course, became a little bit more structured in terms of, you know, actually formulating the LLC and, you know, the shares and the this, the that, and the salaries and whatever, and positions and what have you. So, yeah, but it worked out well. I mean, it's been great. He's been a mentor. He's been a friend. He's been very supportive of me and my family. So I'm grateful to work with somebody like Mike. Plus, he's got so much experience. I mean, a lot of people don't know Mike's background to the extent that, you know, I do, but I mean, he started off in retail when he was like, I think 17 years old. And then from retail, he started working for General in the, you know, the good old days, you know, and with the Colemans and all that, and tells me great stories about those days. So he has a huge, you know, data bank of experience to draw upon. And I constantly learn stuff from him all the time. So, you know, it's interesting. But when we first started working together, it was interesting. I remember there was a few days in the first year where, like, I think I've matured a little bit. I think Mike would even say that, but I mean, there was a point where like I would like be throwing, I literally threw a chair across the room. I remember that I had a fit about something just because I'm kind of more of a creative and impulsive. And I was like pissed and I was like, fuck this. And I was throwing chairs. And so now I'd like to think that I've matured over the last decade. And so we have a really good working relationship.
Been a
Kind of
long
got
time
that
since your
all out from
last
the
chair
first
thrown.
Yeah, definitely. I've had some lifestyle changes too over the years, which have helped. So put it that way.
Yeah, what would you say is the I guess because there's so many inspirations. If I because as I was just kind of looking back to the beginning and how it's kind of evolved, and there really hasn't been too much evolution in the sense of like departure from the early days of Crowned Heads in terms of like themes and inspiration. There, music, of course, is a heavy part of it. We've got of course, your portrait in the background that's very famous in the storytelling of some of your cigars. And
Mm-hmm.
but what would you say was the like when you and Mike sat down from the creative aspect, like, hey, we want to build cigars around this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, the truth is that we spent about the first 3 weeks of meeting together, cigars per se. It was more about establishing the ethos and the core values of what would become Crowned Heads. And I was very clear with Mike, like, I'll do this, but I don't want to create CAO 2.0. I want to do things differently. If you give me that latitude, then I'm in. And my vision was to create an aspirational brand. And by that, I mean, like I use Harley Davidson as a great, role model of aspiration. Like, even though somebody may not ride a bike, they still aspire to that lifestyle, to that brand. They might wear the clothing or what have you. And they just vibe with what Harley stands for. So the whole carve your own path mantra kind of became part and parcel to us, because my vision was like to use Crowned Heads as like inspiration to anybody out there like that could say like, hey, I've always wanted to start my own whiskey, or I wanted to start my own cigar company, or my own coffee company, or I wanted to do this, that, and the other, but they were just always too timid to try. And I felt like if we could be successful, they could look at these two guys from Tennessee, started a premium cigar company and had a good run at it. And hey, if they can do it, we can do it too. So I wanted people to aspire to that message, that I wanted the Crowned Heads to be inspirational and aspirational. So it was more than just cigars. And that was the first 3 weeks of our chapter is defining what that was. And we felt like if everything we did kind of was in line with that ethos, and that would be our guide, that would be our foundation going forward. So that's kind of where it all started.
Okay. Well, that's I mean, I'm and then of course the decision was made very similar to your time at CAO and what the Ozgener family did. You guys decided to partner with different manufacturers rather than build your own factory from the ground up and things like that. What the decision to work with Ernesto Perez Carrillo Jr. I mean, seems like an obvious one in retrospect, but how did that relationship start?
So, we didn't know who was going to make the first cigar. And Mike and I took off, I think it was like March or April of 2011. And we went down to Central America and started visiting factories and what have you. And a gentleman by the name of Gustavo Cura was very instrumental in giving us entree into various factories and meeting with different people and different processing places and what have you, to kind of just call all these opportunities together, because of our experience at CAO and our connections and what have you, a lot of doors were opened for us and we had some opportunities. It was up to us to come back from that trip and really kind of cull it down to figure out, okay, what is the right move? And we met with a lot of people and visited a lot of factories. But ironically, on that trip, we had to go through Miami. And when we were in Miami, Mike says, let me call up Ernie, because he was close with Ernesto. Let's just have dinner with him. And we did. We had a very informal dinner with him and his son. And, he basically was just kind of like, this is cool. If there's anything you guys need, let me know, whatever. But there was no formal talk of doing a cigar together. So when we got back from that trip, we literally took like these huge sheets of white paper, and we had like a rating system of like 4 or 5 different categories, 1 through 10, as far as opportunities. We would rate each factor, each opportunity. Everything from like cigars rated, how many brands were in the house, to relationship, to trust, all this kind of a thing. And when we literally scored it like you would rate a cigar. And when we did that exercise, at the end of it, it was Ernie. And we're like, okay, well, Ernesto is the guy. Well, now will he make a cigar for us? And that was the question, because at that point, he wasn't doing any contract brands. He had just started EPC in 2009. Mm-hmm. And so this is, 11. And so we were like, well, let's ask him. And so he said yes, with a condition. The condition was that we would have to come down there and we would literally have to build the car, as opposed to him selling us a car off the lot. That's the best analogy I could use.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I wanted to hear. I mean, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And he said, look, if this thing is successful, good for you. If it doesn't work, it's on you, not me. And that's exactly what I wanted to hear. Because as soon as it was announced in Cigar Insider, I think, that we were starting this company in February of 11. It was announced, and literally, like, my phone was ringing like the next day, and we had some very prominent people like saying, hey, I had one guy say, look, I've got the cigar for you. All you need to do is come up with a good name and a band, and we'll make $1 million. And that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to literally build the car myself. And so we went to school, basically. I went back down with Ernie, and he was like, we were like validating tobacco from finca to finca, from region to region. And he's like, show me this, show me that, how to validate by smelling and just, inhaling, and all these different things that he taught me. And that's how we built Four Kicks. And Four Kicks became our first release, which, to your point, started shipping in November of 11. And it met with pretty good acclaim. I mean, we got a good vertical out of CI at the time. It was a featured cigar, and a lot of people were talking about Four Kicks, and created a lot of buzz. And that was it. I remember we started shipping literally to 66 doors across the country. And that was our humble start. And now we're in, I think, over 1,200, and we're also international as well now, obviously. So it's been a ride, like you said.
I can honestly say I've been a fan of like most of the cigars that you've released. Like they're when I say a fan, like they are in my rotation. I've bought boxes. They've kind of hit the palette all across the way and everything. Across the scope of all of them. There's been a couple of exceptions, which, no one's perfect, and my palate certainly isn't akin to everything that everybody makes and everything. But what's interesting, I find it interesting that I've always said this, that it wasn't until a few years later, we'll talk about the cigar, that kind of supplanted it. But like with you and, like, for example, Steve Saka with Sober Mason, Four Kicks, I've always gravitated to the OG. The original one has always spoke to me. It spoke to my palate, hit it. I love going back to it. I love smoking it. But I'm going to get even more specific with you. The sublime size, or what us gringos would call sublime size.
Right. Right.
How did that come to fruition? Because you seem to, everything has been a cognizant and a very precise decision by you and Mike, and especially from the creative aspect, that's definitely been your avenue as well. Like, what was it about the sublime size that was like, this is gonna, because it became an overarching theme throughout. I mean, you have not every line you've created has that size, but a considerable amount of them do.
The one size that actually I've kept consistent, aside from like a Robusto, was that 5 5/8 46, the original Corona Gorda, because that has always been like my personal favorite Vitola. Going back to the CAO days, like the last brand that I really had my fingerprints on was a brand called La Traviata. And La Traviata was
so good.
So that cigar, ironically, it was, Tim at that time was doing all the product development, but he had to take off for like 3 months. He had to go back to Turkey to get I think he actually had to go in the army or something like that, to keep his dual citizenship, his passport, what have you. And so they kind of like tasked me to, oversee La Traviata. And I'm like, okay. bare bones packaging. We're going to do a Corona Gorda 5 5/8 40. This is what I saw and what I wanted to do in it. And that was some pretty good success. And so I've always been a fan of that particular Vitola. So I kept that current. As far as the Sublime, I think that was more Ernesto's suggestion. He's more of the larger ring gauge guy than I am, than I have been. And so he kind of turned me on to that 654. And so we started very, very small. I think we started with a Corona Gorda 5 5/8 46, a Robusto. And I threw a Pyramida in there as well, like a 6 1/4 52, and then the Sublime 654. And those were the 4 Vitolas that we started shipping to 66 stores across the country. And then it's just kind of, the rest is history, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I give Ernie it's a great size. It's funny because now, 11 years later, that's probably what people would call a Toro or something. But to me, that was like a huge cigar back then. I was like, 654, oh my God, But now it's kind of like pretty average, I guess. I don't know.
I know you got talked into a 60 gauge years later, which we won't digress into too much, but so the 50, in retrospect, the 54 definitely looks looks a lot more approachable.
Yeah.
By comparison. So we're going to take a quick break here, John, talk about a couple of what I call my fun segments here.
Okay.
And don't worry, the first one is multiple choice. So we are going to go back to school a little bit. And that is part of our United Cigar Presidential Trivia segment, which is always brought to you by United Cigars, featuring La Giana Havana and distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, and the highly acclaimed Atabey and Byron. Everyone, we really, and now the new Alfonso lines from Selected Tobacco. Smoke one today and start living united. Now, John, you've known Miguel for years, and just like him, I am a fiend for presidential trivia. And Oliver Nouveau of United Cigar was kind enough to put this segment together with me, and so we get to go back to school and talk a little presidential trivia with guests and everything. And so I have a question that pertains to you on a couple of levels. One is music, and the other is your namesake. So and then let me go ahead and bring it up here. So it happens to be about John Tyler, President John Tyler, of course, our 10th president. But before he became president, he was inspired to be a concert musician. With what instrument? Was it A, the violin, B, the guitar, or C, the piano?
Jeez. This is terrible. I'm like such an idiot with this stuff. I'm going to go with piano.
I wondered if that was going to throw you off, because the piano, like, it seems like an obvious choice and everything, especially back then. It's actually violin. It was actually the violin. Yes, it was actually the violin.
Violin.
Maybe I made it too hard.
Choice.
I'm sorry. What's interesting about the guitar, so he actually quit the violin when he went into law and then eventually politics and everything. But after he left the White House, he actually became not a concert, but he would do regular performances of violin, and he would do duets with his wife, who was actually a guitarist. So fun little fact there.
Fun fact.
Yeah.
Never would have guessed that.
I think you'll appreciate. I was kind of thinking about presidents and musicians and stuff when I was thinking about this question for you and everything, and I think you'll get a kick out of Harry Truman. He was once quoted as saying, "My choice early in life was either to be a piano player in a whorehouse or a politician. And to tell you the truth, there really isn't any difference." So I thought you might get a kick out of Harry Truman, who played piano throughout his life and frequently entertained guests at the White House and everything. So, now, do you play any musical instruments, or do you just have a wonderful affinity for music itself?
Wonderful affinity for music itself is the answer to that question. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, not to say I didn't try. When I was a kid, I mean, the first thing I can remember ever wanting to do was play drums when I was like 5. And I was that kid that pulled the pots out and with the spoons, or constantly. And I remember getting a drum set when I was like 5 for Christmas, and every day I would come home from school, turn on the radio, and just start playing. And then one day I came home and where's the drum kit? What happened to it? Obviously it was creating too much racket, so it got disposed of. So I always wonder what would have happened if, rather than throwing my drum kit out, they had encouraged me to continue drumming, because I have a pretty good natural rhythm and a good, I remember being in college, sitting in my dorm room and just tapping on something, and one of the guys that was in the drum line for the marching band said, "Why don't you audition?" And I'm like, "I've never played drums in my life." They're like, "No, you're good. You could play." And I'm like, "Nah." So yeah, no, it was. And then I took guitar lessons for a stint when I was like fifth grade. I wanted to play guitar, and this is a funny story because I took lessons every Saturday at this church. This guy would teach, and I went for about 3 weeks, and I practiced and I did all this, and he couldn't figure out why I couldn't get it. And then, like on the fourth week, he realized that I was playing the guitar upside down because I was playing it left-handed. I'm like, it took this guy 3 weeks to see that I'm playing the guitar backwards, so all the chords were upside down. So I was like, okay, that's and that was about the end of my musical endeavors. But I love music. I've always loved music.
I read an interview with you of yours one time where I think someone was asking you about music, and you mentioned like your recent Spotify playlist included such an eclectic group of artists. If I remember some of the band, and if I choose one of the bands you didn't like, I apologize. But if I remember them
That's
correctly,
all
I mean
right.
there was everything from there was the Strokes, Jack Johnson, the
Yeah,
Eagles, Parliament,
yeah,
Funkadelic, Louis
yeah. Parliament.
Armstrong,
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
Breeders, um,
Breeders, definitely. Yeah, I
um,
still listen to all that stuff. Yeah,
the Pixies,
I mean, I
like
would I would add a little bit. Yeah, there's a lot of old stuff like that I listen to. But now I listen to like ASAP Rocky, Kendrick Lamar, a lot of the stuff that I kind of grew up on, like Jay-Z, Tupac, Biggie. I mean, the first album I ever bought when I was a kid was Parliament Mothership Connection. So I was a big Parliament, Funkadelic, Bootsy Collins, and that was the kind of music I grew up on. And then later on, I got into rap and hip hop. Everything from shoot, Wu-Tang to on and on. And so I still listen to that stuff all the time. As far as the new music goes, I haven't really vibed with a lot of new stuff. Kendrick might be new, I guess, maybe not. It's funny. My wife kind of like influences my music sometimes, and it's just she turned me on to Maneskin. I think they're pretty good, but other than that, it's like I just find myself going back to the old stuff. But the old stuff is diverse. I mean, if I could pull up my Spotify, what I've been listening to, it's just I'll see what's on repeat. But yeah, it's just I listen to everything except country, ironically, right? So
is Cash being the
yeah,
exception to
so I've
that, or
got like on
do
my
you
on
consider
repeat
Cash
list.
rock?
No, I no, I consider Cash like kind of like outlaw country, like him and Waylon and those kind of guys. I would listen to that. I think they're cool, but like new country just doesn't do it for me. But like on my repeat list, I've got the Breeders, Gorillas, Method Man, Busta Rhymes, ASAP Rocky, Yellow Wolf, Caskey, Stone Temple Pilots, EPMD, La Cosa Nostra, Linkin Park, Blur, Kanye West, Billy Bragg Wilco, Pretenders, Tyler the Creator, Beastie Boys, Tribe Called Quest, Travis Scott. What else we got on here? I got Cypress Hill, Earth, Wind and Fire, more Blur, Tom Petty Heartbreakers. Yeah, so it's all over the board here. Grupo Maximo. Uh, yeah, so it's eclectic
I'm the same
for
way. I'm a
sure.
very eclectic listener. I'm not a huge consumer of music. Like I'm not one of those people that remembers albums too much. Like or like, I mean
Hmm.
I remember the first CD I bought, and that tells you a little bit, ages me a little bit. About what my first album was, and it was country, much to your dismay. But it but it's never been it yeah, music's never been like I've never been just a huge consumer of it where I've just gone out and bought stuff. I went to
Yeah,
concerts when I was young. I've always liked a lot of different things, and I've been to a lot of different kinds of concerts. So people always said like you that that I have an they're like you have a great appreciation for music. And I'm like, I do. I just feel like I have an encyclopedic knowledge about a lot of things, or I have a lot of passion about a lot of things: cigars, baseball, history. And that's what I think I've dedicated my brain space to. So I think that just, music got
Sure.
moved to the side somewhat a little bit, but
Yeah. The thing with music, I can listen to a song and it takes me back to a place. You know what I mean? It puts me in a different mindset or in a creative mode or what have you. So I found myself listening to a lot of music, and then I'll just go down a rabbit hole. Like, I'll start listening to interviews with the bass player from Stone Temple Pilots on the way to work. That's what I listened to today. I listened to an interview this guy did. I think his name was Bob DeLeo, and he was just talking about different bass lines that he created when they were recording Core and Purple. And it was just, I don't know, it's just something about that creative process just kind of gets me. I like it.
It's awesome. Well, that was our presidential trivia segment, which is always brought to you by
Which
United
I
Cigars.
sucked at.
Hey,
Thank you, United Cigars, for making me look like a moron.
We got you there. We got you there. It was more of a foray and a tool to get us into a little bit of music conversation too. So, but as always, our presidential trivia segment is brought to you by United Cigars, featuring La Gianna Havana, Jose Domingos, Bandolero, Garofalo, and the highly acclaimed Atabey, Byron, and now Alfonso lines from Selected Tobacco. Smoke one today and start living united. And look forward to June as we will start our 20 Days of Freedom campaign with United Cigars. There are 20 cigars in a United Cigar box, and we'll be celebrating from Flag Day to our nation's Independence Day, July 4th, with a United Cigar each day. More details to come on that, so you want to check that out, coming from United Cigars and us here at ELOSOFUMARTAKES. So it'll be a lot of fun, and a lot of history will be shared during those 20 days. So look forward to that. Jon, moving on to, we were talking a little bit about your obviously relationship with Tim and Jon Ozgener and the Ozgener family and everything. This is a special segment that I've done every show too, and with your blessing and permission, I actually chose a charity for us. We do a charity segment here every week, and I thought it would be a good idea to kind of spotlight a little bit the Turkish philanthropy funds that Tim is dedicating a lot of the proceeds from Bosphorus to help out the people that were unfortunately affected by that ungodly earthquake that happened in Turkey not too long ago. So I know it's his project and everything, so I won't ask you to speak about it, but I know you have a heart for charity, and I know that stems, probably an influence a lot from the Ozgener family, because they've always had a mind for charity and everything. But have you always did you have a charitable upbringing that also kind of influenced it as well? And, or has was that kind of fostered during your time at CAO? And
I remember coming up, like my grandmother, we didn't have a lot of money or anything, but what little they did, they would always donate to St. Jude's. And so there was always that, idea of giving, and, my family donates to a church that does work in Africa and brings, well water to poor people in Africa and things like that. And then, yeah, in CAO, like I remember we did something for the Haiti Relief Fund. There was always a little bit of something that Jon would always give back. So it was good to see that, and to always be cognizant of trying to, help others that are less fortunate. 100%.
We'll have the link to donate to the Turkish Philanthropy Funds in the show notes, and you will be able to check that out. It's a great cause, obviously.
Yes.
Initial reports of 35,000 people who lost their life. That's more people than most small towns here in our country, which is just unbelievable when you think about the amount of turmoil. I just to reflect on Jon Ozgener for a second. I remembered unfortunately when he passed away, I remember reading his obituary, and there were a lot of things that you could have put a title on a man of his stature, but the word that accompanied him, his name, which I thought was very spot on, was philanthropist. And I really I had known that to some extent, during my time of, smoking his cigars and knowing a little bit of him during that time. But It was only in his death, unfortunately, that I learned about just all the incredible work that he did with, within the arts community and philanthropy and everything like that. And that must have been, um, that's got to be a huge inspiration for what you continued to do today with Crowned Heads and everything.
Yeah, for those that were fortunate to know him, on a day-to-day basis, it's like Jono to me was much more than a cigar guy. He was like a spiritual Buddha of sorts. Like he was like this, he just had this calming presence about him. I never saw him like upset. He was always very like even, very like just meditative, but very inspirational. Like, some of the mantras that he taught us were, make it happen. That was one of the things he'd always say, make it happen. And that really influenced my life a lot, because he basically said, anything that you can conceive and believe, you will achieve if you put your mind to it. It's the world is a blank check and you can write in your amount. And he was a living example of that, really, and, I remember, to give you a concrete example of that, one day we were in the office, and this is back, I guess, in the 90s, maybe early 2000s. And somebody had mentioned that they were smoking cigars on this HBO show called The Sopranos. And somebody said, well, why don't we get our cigars on The Sopranos? And here's this little, startup company in Nashville. And John said, make it happen. And I'm just like, okay. And that was the naivete that we had. Like, you could just do whatever, just go do it. And at that time, I had been in communication with a product placement company in Southern California called UPP. And I remember this guy had been pitching me like, hey, we can get your product on da, da, da. The way those things were structured back then, where like, if you give them a check for X, they will say, well, we'll place you in 7 different places, but you didn't have the right to say where you were going to be placed. They would just place you. So I decided, naively enough, to go back, and I said, hey, if I wanted one spot, what would it cost? And I'm going to be selective about that spot. And they said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to get on the Sopranos. And we negotiated a contract, and that led us to getting our cigars on the Sopranos.
Oh, wow.
And then that evolved into a relationship with HBO, that they contacted us to do a licensing deal for CAO, the Sopranos edition. And so that led to that opportunity. And then we became friends with like James Gandolfini and the cast. And then we brought him into the Night to Remember dinner for Cigar Aficionado magazine. And so, I mean, it all started with that innocent enough idea of just make it happen. And had that not been the mantra, like, nobody would have ever done anything. But it just taught me that, yeah, you can do things. You just have to believe and just go for it. Because I mean, I've always looked at it like, if you had a room of 100 people and you told, 100 people to go for this, 90 of them are going to right away go, oh, that'll never happen. I'm not going to do it. So now your odds are 1 in 10 that you can do it. So your odds become much better, because most people are just going to be too afraid to fail. So it was definitely a life lesson that he taught, for sure.
That's awesome. I remember the project, of course, and everything. But that's awesome to know the backstory, everything. You said, I know obviously he's passed on as well too. Did you end up building a friendship with James Gandolfini, or is it just a business relationship over time? Or
it was business, but I still have his old cell number in my phone. I just don't delete it, just for whatever reason. And when that Night to Remember dinner came about, I was in contact with his assistant to get him from point A. I was in Nashville. I didn't get to go to the dinner, of course, but I was the guy that was tasked with getting him from point A to point B for that dinner. And so I remember texting his assistant back and forth, and then texting him. And eventually he did get to the dinner, obviously, but so I did a lot of logistics on that. And then like about 6 months later, I had to go out to Vegas to do like this. They were doing this unveiling of a Sopranos slot machine thing, and they had hired some of the cast to be there, and then we came in with the cigars, and so they were taking photos and stuff. And I remember that there was at one point where they had us all standing up and taking our picture, and I stood next to James Gandolfini, and I just was like, I'm standing there, and he's like standing next to me, and he just leaned into me and just whispered in my ear, because I never smile in pictures because I don't like my smile, and I'm kind of like, I'm not a big smiling guy. And Alan, he just whispered in my ear, he goes, "You look like you're having about as much fun as I am being here." And I said, "Yeah, I guess so," you know. And it was just kind of cool. That was a kind of a moment. And I still have that picture somewhere. I don't know where, but that was about my extent of meeting him, and you know, but seemed like a nice guy for sure.
Still didn't know the backstory of that. That's really cool. He seems like the type that would say something like that. So that's very apropos.
Yeah, I mean, the night of the Night to Remember dinner, I remember was he was more concerned about being at his son's karate practice than, you know, he was like he wasn't going to leave until his son was finished with karate. So he was there in Manhattan watching that, and it was like, hey, you got to get ready, you got to go put on the tux, you got to go be at, you know, Marriott Marquis or wherever it was. And so he was like, when I'm done, you know, kind of thing. It was his kid was more important to him than that, and that spoke volumes to me. So
great lesson there. So going back to obviously the beginnings of Crowned Heads and everything. So other core lines followed the Four Kicks, of course, and then Headley Grange, JD Howard Reserve, and then you decided to partner with another acclaimed cigar maker, Don Pepin Garcia. The Jericho Hill, probably, I think, from my memory and my time, there have been stars of the trade show, and I can remember quite a few of them over the years and everything. But I think the Jericho Hill, if you'll permit me here, Jon, I think was the first one that going in was the one that everyone was talking about and had the buzz. And then it also, for me, it was the one that also, and for many, I think, well, a lot of people will agree with me, that it was the one that actually delivered. It did both. It went in as the headliner and then kind of came out as the headliner as well. And I mean, it was just it's been an incredible cigar. It's the one that I go to. I bought a box of Jericho Hill when the day we found out if my oldest was a boy or girl. We did, you know, a gender reveal. And and I had two cigar boxes lined up. I had one if it was going to be a girl, and I had a box of Jericho Hill if it was going to be a boy, which was my son Jeremiah. And we found out it was going to be a boy, of course. So we opened up the Jericho Hill box, and
awesome.
I still have half the box saved.
That's so cool.
That I've been smoking on occasion, at different points of celebration and everything. So, what was you know, that and then obviously that cigar is inspired from Johnny Cash. I'd mentioned him a moment ago. What was the significance of, okay, we've built this great relationship, we've had these amazing cigars with Ernesto, now we want to branch out to potentially other manufacturers. You find another, you know, again, stellar cigar maker to make a cigar for you. What was the catalyst that ended up becoming that next step and the next progression as you grew this brand?
It actually goes back to that Central American tour in 2011. And we had met with Jaime and Pepin, and I give all credit to my friend Pete Johnson. He orchestrated that meeting. And so, you know, because at that time we were just like looking at opportunities. So Pete set that meeting up with us, and, you know, Jaime gave us samples and gave us the tour, as gracious as the day is long. And we walked away from there. And one of the reasons why we didn't go with that house initially was because at that time there were just so many other brands that Pepin was making. He was not only making, you know, his stuff, but Pete's stuff, Ashton, and there was a lot of other brands under there. And we just felt like we'd be like, you know, seventh in line. We just didn't, you know. Whereas with Ernie, we can kind of start from scratch and be one of the top. So anyway, fast forward to like 2014, Ernie was starting to do other stuff, or it looked like he was going to do other stuff with other companies aside from us. And so we're like, well, maybe we should kind of hedge our bets and start to diversify a little bit. So I went back to Pete and I said, hey, do you think you could get us back in a meeting with Jaime? He's like, yeah. And so in January of 14, I went back down there by myself, and with actually Pete and Yanni were on that trip, and we were all together, and I went back down there to start what would become Las Calaveras. And so while we were down there, I had an idea for a cigar, And I pitched it to Jaime, and I asked him if he had a particular wrapper, and he said, yeah, and he showed me all the pilons of it. And I said, well, I've got an idea. And the way I pitched it to him was I wanted to make a poor man's Padron. And he kind of smiled, and I said, and that's kind of where the inspiration for the blend came. So we walked out of there with a few ideas, and eventually we released, Las Calaveras 2014 with the Garcias, and then at the trade show that year we released Jericho Hill, and it was a hit right away, And but I give so much credit and gratitude to Pete, because without Pete you wouldn't have Jericho Hill, La Imperiosa, you wouldn't have the last 9 renditions of Las Calaveras, because he was the guy that got us in the door.
I love that you segued into Las Calaveras, because I love the series. I'm a huge fan of it. I have cigars going all the way back to 14. Still do. I've kept some every year. For me,
you've got more than I do.
For me, the 2014,
for sure.
I think that was and I had certainly smoked other limited edition cigars before that. But for me, the 2014 Las Calaveras was the one that is really etched in my memory. For whatever reason, it just really spoke to me, and I really loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was just incredible. Every Vitola that was released, I just remember just everything was just thoroughly enjoyable about those cigars. And
thank you.
What I've loved about this series, John, I'll say this, I think that, and I've said this before on other shows and other discussions, I think the only thing that rivals Pete's Monster series in terms of like limited edition series is the Las Calaveras, with as much acclaim and notoriety, people seeking it, the whole story, if you will. When you first brainchild, was this part of the vision, like, hey, we want to create a series, maybe not comparing it to what Pete was doing, but we want to create a series that's going to be every year that we're going to give something to our fans, so to speak, to look forward to? Was that part of the
None whatsoever.
None
whatsoever. I kind of thought it might be a one and done thing. I really didn't have any idea that it would get to the level where it got. The whole idea was just to kind of pay homage to the people that we lost the year before. And that was as simple as that. And then when it took off in 14, they're like, well, I guess we had to do it again. So it just became an annual thing. And so that's really, it just kind of just grew and grew. And, knock on wood, still probably, if you look at the production, it would be, it's hard to call it limited edition anymore. It's the production numbers are pretty high. But a lot of brands our size would be happy to sell that in a year. And the last 2 Las Calaveras that we did, we've sold out in less than a day. So it's its own entity. It's like, it's hard to call it an LE, even though it's an LE, but it's probably, as far as brand recognition, might be our top, but I gave all credit to the Garcias. I mean, like Pete told me back in 14, he's like, if you start with good tobacco, he's like, our job as brand owners is just not to fuck it up, and that's true. You're as good as the factories you work with, and we're just very fortunate to be working with people like the Garcias, or like Ernesto and Tabacalera La Alianza, and now Naxa, and Takanixa with Iradio. So yeah, just very blessed to work with very talented people in this industry that make us look better than what we are, to be honest with you.
My last note of Las Calaveras is, I remember in 2015 there was a movie that was released. It was in the James Bond series. It was called Spectre. And have you had the chance to, have you had the opportunity to see it?
No, so if it's not a Disney film, I probably haven't seen it.
The same way. I get you, John.
Yeah. So I'm a big Frozen guy. I like Frozen.
Me too. Yeah, I know. Frozen and Frozen 2. Which one is are you the OG, or do you like do you like the sequel? You like the sequel.
I've seen them both. Yeah, I like the sequel too, though. I mean, like, now we're getting off target, but we have a tradition at my house where every Friday night we have movie night. And so what I do is I bring a mattress down to the little media room, and AJ will camp out there and I'll camp out on the sofa, and I'll sleep down there with her and we'll watch a movie. And my wife and I and AJ will have pizza and watch a movie. And it's always the movie that AJ picks. And so we end up watching Moana for the 13th time, or Frozen 2 or whatever. And I love it, man. That's my favorite night of the week. But so yeah, to answer, that's a long-winded way of saying no, I have not seen Spectre. So anyway.
There's an opening montage that takes place in Mexico City during Dias de los Muertos, right? And you'll love it. I'll send you the scene because I think you'll appreciate it musically. Beautiful musical number that takes place the scene, and then this almost somewhat of a dance, right? That's the parade of the Day of the Dead, and people are dressed in the traditional Dias de los Muertos, the face painting, the mask, similar to the designs of the cigar, right? The sugar skulls, etc., and everything. And I remember seeing that in the theater, and I remember watching the montage, and I was like, I'm gonna go home and smoke a Las Calaveras. I'm gonna do it. It spoke to me. It was like, and I know Dave Burke of Cigar Jukebox, who's recently brought that over to Breda. So Dave and I had I guested on his show years later, and we talked about, and we smoked Las Calaveras that day, and he said, what song do you think of? And I said, it's the number one song that I think of when I think of Las Calaveras is this opening scene. I don't know who the composer is or who the music group is that does it. I just think of this opening scene from Spectre every time, every year, every time I open a box, every year I think of that montage, and it also takes me back to 2014, to the original first time that I smoked Las Calaveras, and it's such a great memory for me in my cigar smoking journey. That plays such a huge part of it, and I know I'm not alone. So you've created something so beautiful, and in the fact that it's in memory of those loved lost is such a beautiful component to that.
I appreciate that. It's a project we look forward to doing every year, and it's kind of bittersweet because then you kind of go, okay, who's going to be on the band this year? Like, who passed away last year? And it's just like. But it was never meant to be like a mournful thing. It was always to celebrate the lives of these people that have passed on. So it's meant to be a celebratory thing as opposed to a mournful thing, which is why we didn't release it, in October, Day of the Dead type of a thing. It was more to be like in the spring, resurgence and all that. So it was very intentional in that regard. But yeah, we got the 2023s in production now, and I'm excited to get it out. I really am. I think every year I always think, okay, this is the one that's going to put the 14 away, because the 14 is the grail. This one's going to, and so I thought the 15 was better than the 14. Jaime thought the 15 was better than the 14. But yeah, the 14, I guess, is always going to be special. So
17 was the one that kind of came close for me.
I can't even remember what that was.
The green.
Tell me the color of the band.
The green band. That was 17, right?
I believe that was San Andreas rap. Was it San Andreas?
Yes.
I think it was. Yeah. And then 18 was Habano. 19. I thought 19 was really good too. That was the one we did for Jono. Every year we've had 4 sets of initials except for 19. 19 was just a tribute to Jono. We put his initials and then 2 acronyms for Make It Happen and Talk Is Cheap, which were 2 of his sayings. And then so that was kind of a Jono thing. And I thought that blend was fantastic. But
that was good too.
It didn't fire as much as I thought it would. And so which actually was a blessing in disguise, because I think in 19 the production had gotten up to 135,000 cigars, and it took us about a month to sell it. And I'm like, it's not selling out like it used to. I said, you know what, I'm going back to the numbers in 14. And in 2020, that's what we did. We drew back the production back to the original 72,000 cigars.
I remember it was harder to find.
And it sold out. Yeah, sold out like in hours. And then 21, same thing happened. 22, the same thing happened. So we'll see what happens this year. But yeah, I remember one year it was like Ticketmaster. It was like, okay, wait a second, what number are we at now? Okay, send a text to the guys. I got to cut it off. They got to cut it off. It just was crazy. It's a fun day for us. So
speaking of fun days, one of my favorite things that you do is Outlaw Day.
Haven't done it. Yeah, we haven't done it since, I think we did it for 2 years, and then we couldn't do it because there was a broadleaf shortage.
Right.
And those two cigars that you're referring to, Tennessee Waltz and Yellow Rose, are both Connecticut broadleaf, and we just couldn't get production. I think the last shipment we got was in 19, so we didn't have enough to do an outlaw lawless day, and so we took our foot off the gas on that. But now, the end of last year, we got a shipment, and then we got another shipment in earlier this year, and then I just saw Yanni at the TA, and she said you could do more this year. So we're going to keep getting Waltz and Rose out, but there won't be any official like lawless day because there's just not enough to go around. It just, as soon as we get it, it's gone. So
And did Buckeye Land fall into that too, as well?
Buckeye Land was one we did for Ohio at Miguel's request, and that was in 19. We did that with Drew Estate, and then we just couldn't get it anymore from them. It was like, that was it. That's all you're going to get. So it was,
Phenomenal
we
cigar.
don't have Buckeye Land around anymore.
I have 3 left.
Yeah, it was great. It was
Yeah.
great. And it was a sentimental project for me too, because the genesis of that was my wife was born in Ohio. So I have a place in my heart for that. So her maiden name is Land. So Buckeye Land is the name of the Ohio exclusive, or was. And in another Easter egg kind of a thing is, like, on that box you'll see small like Roman numerals, and it was the actual physical address of where she grew up, in the house that she grew up. So,
nice. I love
yeah,
the little hidden gems that you and a lot of your
I do
fellow
too.
cigar makers do, and you guys do a great job with it. I think it
Thank
wasn't
you.
until like as much as I loved and adored the Lost Calaveras project, I don't think it was until like 2 years in maybe that I knew the initials grabbed my attention, you know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I love the little gems you guys do with that. Um, so another project that's kind of taken off of, and this kind of leads into a question I think you've answered on your new show Ozheads with Tim and everything, because I think a
Mhm.
lot of people were worried, you know, with recent events and everything, that the Mil Diaz was going to go away. What an incredible project that has been for you guys. What an incredible cigar. I
Yeah.
if I cannot recall meeting someone that hasn't liked it. Um, which tells you a lot about how well it's beloved. It's something incredibly unique. It's
Thank you.
something incredibly unique to your portfolio too. I don't think there's anything like, hey, this is similar, or this is like, or hey, if you like this, it's a standalone,
Right.
stand on its own, just great project.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I knew that cigar was special when I smoked the what became the final blend, which was in January of 2020, and that was when the pandemic hit. So ironically, that's like, aside from being one of our top performers in our portfolio, it was also the cigar that we did not release at a trade show. It was organic.
Right.
All of that took off organically. And it was, yeah, a very unique cigar. And I was very proud of that project. And but to address the elephant in the room, nothing has changed about it. We're still producing it. In fact, oddly enough, I didn't plan this, but Thaddeus from shipping just brought in a pre-release bundle. This is the Mil Diaz Maranitos
Oh, wonderful.
that is actually going to be released this month. So I just got that in from the factory, and they look beautiful. So yeah, no, we're continuing with that. Yeah, obviously there's a lot of things happen in 22 that I wish didn't have to happen, but they did. But we are continuing to work with Horacio Pichardo at Takanixa, which is his factory that he is now renamed. And we're moving forward full steam ahead. So, but for the second half of 22, we pretty much took our foot off the gas on that brand because of a lot of things that were going on behind the scenes and legal things and what have you, and unfortunate. And then we're just like, okay, come on, let's go. We got to get back on it. So that cigar is not going anywhere. It's a great cigar. And again, credit Horacio Pichardo for that. And we're excited about it. I'm excited for the Maranitos to come out.
Me too.
The story behind this cigar. I don't know. Yeah, this is a 6 1/8 by 48, and I had wanted to do another Maranitos, and so to kind of celebrate Horacio a little bit, I asked him, what was his favorite Vitola, and he told me 6 1/8 48, and I'm like, all right, this is how we're going to reintroduce the brand more or less. But it's still selling. We're still shipping. It's going nowhere, and it's doing great.
Um, the just so I'm finishing up the Le Patissier that you've now moved production to the Noxa factory and everything.
Oxa. Yeah.
The and it's smoking fantastic. I've really enjoyed this. And I know present companies obviously helped with that as well too, but it's I think I really enjoyed it the other day when I smoked it, like I said, for the first time from this factory, and then
Mhm.
it's just been a really, really enjoyable experience. Um, I
Yeah, and
remember.
again, not to be like
Sure.
repetitive, but all credit to Raul Disla and Gustavo Cura and Oxa, because I mean, I started that transition in March or April of 22. I kind of saw the writing on the wall. I'm like, okay, we're gonna do Patissier, but I'm gonna eventually this is gonna be in at Noxa. So I contacted Gustavo, which kind of came full circle to those meetings back in 11, and I said, hey, do you guys have any room in production? And he says, we would love to have, Crown Heads as a part of what we're doing, because
Terrific.
he's like, it would give us some more credibility. We're just doing Steve's stuff, Saka, and I knew they were making great cigars for him. And it was just, we hit the ground running with those guys. I mean, Gustavo, people that don't know, he also works for Liba Tobacco Company and Prosenixa, and he's one of the best tobacco brokers, if not the best, to me. And he procures some of the best broadleaf, best tobaccos,
Right.
period. And Raul Disla, I mean, Raul's fucking genius as far as blending. So I knew that cigar was going to be a hit. I really did. So I'm very happy with it. I wish it got more attention, and we're working on doing that, because it's really a gem.
I um I was really excited from the nerd aspect. I was really excited because, like you noted about how the work that they do and the tobacco they get specifically with broadleaf. And when you said you were moving, I was like,
Mhm.
oh man, that's going to be something special. I knew it. I just and I
Yeah,
was really
it
excited.
is.
I was really excited about that particular move. We spoke about the Mil Diaz, just considering some of the other blends that you've had that were manufactured at the factory formerly known as Pichardo, but still
Hmm.
done by Pichardo, like the Serie E, for example.
Yeah,
Juarez was the first project you did. You guys kind of kept that under wraps who the factory was at the time. Are
right.
those still going to be continued to be manufactured there? Have there been any plans made, or is that still kind of
Yo,
open?
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's ongoing production. In fact, Juarez, we're actually working on a sampler, which will be out later, probably in the next couple of months, actually. This is kind of a hot take, but it'll be our first foray into like a fresh pack. So we're doing like a
Oh,
fresh pack sampler of the four existing Juarez sizes, and then one fresh pack exclusive size that we're calling Ferdinand, which is this little 4x58 bowl.
oh, nice.
So yeah, so that's going to be coming out. So I'm excited for that. So
Getting into those big
um,
gauges again, John.
you know, it's not for me, but I get it. So we're doing that. So Juarez is still full steam ahead. Mil Diaz full steam ahead. Serie E, I don't know. I mean, there's something about, I don't know if the CHC part confuses the consumer or what have you. I think it's a great blend, but really hasn't been a big performer for us, even though I think the cigar is fantastic. So I don't know what the future is for Serie E at this point. May repackage it, may just put it on hold. I don't know, but we're definitely focusing on Mil Diaz Juarez out of Tacanixa, which is Radio's place. So yeah.
I remember we exchanged some comments back and forth through Instagram about uh, the series. I took your advice and I listened
Hmm.
to the Van Halen album and song while I was smoking it and tried to
Yeah.
experience that and everything. And I really enjoyed that. For again, I enjoy music as we've kind of talked about earlier and everything. I enjoyed that experiment. I really did. It was an experience that I could say I thoroughly enjoyed and could appreciate what you were going through when you were
It was
describing how.
definitely, yeah, for me it resonated because it was like a sonic metaphor, and but it may have been a little bit too deep down the rabbit hole for the average consumer, and they just kind of dumbed it down to the Eddie Van Halen cigar, which was not my intent at all. It was really sonically inspired by that solo,
Right.
which is where the E stood for eruption, not Eddie. So there's a lot of miscommunication, misbranding, miscues. So while I think the blend is excellent, I think that maybe in the future, sometime down the road, we might repackage it, dumb it down a little bit. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But right now, the two horses out of that particular factory will continue to be Juarez and El Diaz.
The unicorn that I've always wanted to find, and it's the only cigar that you've made that I've never smoked, and it was one I wanted to try, was the WW that you guys did, the limited edition, and I was never able to get it. I'm sure they're all gone at this point.
The Double W, yeah, that was from the Garcias. We did that for Arrington Vineyards.
Right.
Yeah, that's well gone. That was a great little smoke. That was really good. That was a fun project to do. I remember actually going out to Arrington for the debut of that. That was fun. That was a good little moment in time. But yeah, I don't know where you would find that.
Yeah, sure, I was gonna say they're probably all gone at this point, the production size and everything. But it's the one that eluded me. It's the one that did it. It's the one.
If I had some in this warehouse, I'll send you some, but I highly doubt that we have anything left at all.
That would be very kind. But yeah, don't want to put too many eggs in that basket. Like you said, they're probably all smoked at this point.
Yeah.
But Jon, we're coming up onto the end of our time here in just a little bit. I just have a couple of more questions. Thank you so much for today's conversation. It's meant the world to me. It's been a blast. So wanted to go into, we kind of talking about that moment with the Serie E and it was inspired, but you had a lot of inspirational things over the years. Headley Grange has that kind of similar inspiration. Jericho Hill, we mentioned as well, that the lyric and the infamous Cash song as well. And we didn't even talk about JD Howard Reserve, which is still one of my favorites as well. I loved that cigar. I love the story behind it, the historian in me. You guys gave homage to Tennessee and to Jesse James, so that was really cool.
Jesse James, yes sir.
But wanted to go into this is what we call our Asylum moment, and of course it is brought to you by Asylum Cigars. So refuge is more than just a physical place. It can be a state of mind. Some of life's greatest reflections can be found in our own personal asylum. Moments like these were made for Asylum Cigars, so light up an asylum and choose your refuge. Now, Jon, this segment is all about, and I'm sure you've had dozens, if not hundreds, of these moments in your time with smoking cigars and everything. But cigars are very community driven, right? You talked about the team at CAO and how it was like a brotherhood, a fraternity was the word you used, and the countless events that you've attended and been a part of, trade shows, everything. It's a community thing. But every so often we get to experience a moment with the cigar that has nothing to do with people. It's just us. It's just us, that cigar in the moment. We could be listening to a song, watching a movie on family movie night, or seemingly just staring into the abyss for whatever reason. If you what's a moment that comes, maybe not your favorite, I'm not saying you to go back into the chambers that much, but what's a moment that comes to mind where it was just you, the cigar? What was that moment about? And what, if you can recall, what cigar were you smoking?
What, frame it up for me again, Bear? Like what?
A moment where it was just like you and a cigar, you like no one else was there. It was just you, the cigar, and the moment was about something in particular. It could have been about celebrating something. Maybe it was just, a moment of reflection. What was that?
Tough question for me, because, and I'll tell you why that's a tough question for me, because all the cigars that I smoke are here in this office. Like that's the one thing that's, if there's a negative about what I do, I don't have that luxury of like being home or going to the golf course or whatever and sitting there and smoking a cigar. I don't smoke when I'm out of the office, because when I'm home, and like I'm husband and dad, and like there's really no me time at that point. It's like my time is my family's time. So
sure,
I don't really have a lot of those moments, to be honest with you. And most of those times were like, it was like an aha moment where like I smoked a cigar, oh, that's it. Was usually like in the company of like Ernesto or somebody, and I'm down at the factory. Like I remember smoking what became the final blend for Headley Grange. We were leaving this Italian restaurant, ironically, in Santiago after lunch. I got in the car with Ernie, Ernie lit a cigar, handed it back to me, said, "Smoke this." And I smoked it, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is it. What is this?" And became the final. And that kind of moment sticks out in my mind. But there's not a lot of me on the beach, sitting there smoking a cigar and taking it all in. I don't really get those times, to be perfectly honest with you, man. Unfortunately, but that's the price to pay, I suppose. Yeah, I don't do that a lot. It's I don't want to be like poor me, like it's all work, but it is. It's that's the majority of it. I don't really have a lot of those times like we make cigars for people to do exactly what you just described, to like have that moment of reflection on their balcony, on their porch or whatever, and they're sitting there having a spirit and drinking and enjoying, and that's nice, but that's not what I do. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, if we could put a twist on it, I mean, that
Sure.
I think that your moment of asylum isn't found in the cigar, it's found with the family. And so that's your moment of refuge. So
Yeah,
if
yeah,
we,
definitely. I mean, that's no question. Those are my most cherished moments, or because I always think about it as like, when you're in your deathbed, are you gonna go, God, I wish I would have smoked this or drank that? It's probably like, do you really want to say, I wish I would have spent more time with my kids or my wife or what? And I don't want to have those regrets when I go. I want to be able to say, okay, I I left it all on the field. I did everything I could, be with my family, be a good guy, be a good dad, and sometimes we fall short. Sometimes we make good on that. So, but those are the quality times that I enjoy. But I mean, there's certainly moments in my memory that there are certain cigars that stand out to me. But when those moments occurred, I'm usually in the company of other people in the industry.
sure. I've in a way I've been kind of jealous of the time that you spend with your family too. Like I remember, like I said, a couple years ago when I had the first opportunity to interview you, we were talking about family, and you were saying, yeah, your
Mm-hmm.
family was there, and you know, and
Yeah.
and and I really admired you for that. You have that cutoff in that celebration. That's why it's taken 246 takes to make this happen. And again, I'm so grateful for this opportunity
I'm
to
sorry.
be able to do it.
Yeah. No, listen, I mean, and I got to give a lot of credit to my partner, to Laura, my wife. She'll never see this, but I mean, I got to give her credit anyway, because when we decided we were going to take that jump into being married, it was like we established boundaries and ground rules, and it was like, I remember her saying, "Look, I want a husband. I don't want somebody that's going to be on the road." Like, because at that time when we met, I was still a CAO, and yeah, I was traveling a lot. And yeah, I was doing the CAO rock and roll tour, and I was in all these different places, and which was a gas. It was fun, but when it was time to settle down and start a family and be a husband, I was like, okay. I said, this is my commitment to you, and so ever since then, like if I go somewhere with trade show, TAA, PCA, in store, whatever, it's like that's on my rider. Like I'm bringing them with me, and which has been a blessing.
Great.
It's hard, and it's a sacrifice for them too. It's not easy to just pack up and go wherever for a week or something, but that's what we do. That's how we manage it, and doesn't work for everybody, but for us, that's the way it works, and it works for my family. And there's some sacrifice. Like, yeah, I could go out and do in stores and be on the road, and probably, the brand could be. I had this conversation with somebody in the industry. They said, if you were doing in stores, your brand would be like, at this level instead of here or whatever. I said, yeah, probably, but at what price? What
Mhm.
is it? What are you worth sacrificing, right? And I don't want to sacrifice my marriage and my family for that. And for some people it works, but for me, that's not in my cards. So that's why I'm not as visible as others in the industry, but I'm okay with that.
I think I mean it really, like I said, in a way I've really been jealous of it, John. I really have. In
Should be.
jealous has such a negative connotation word, but maybe inspiring is probably a more applicable term, I think, because
Yeah, it's
I admire it. I really do. I think it's something we should all, as a parent, it's something it's something we should really aspire to.
It's just a matter of establishing your values and adhering to those values you establish. It's as simple as that. Like when you put a stick in the ground and say, okay, this is how it's going to be, then you have to have the integrity to follow through with that and say, okay, this is how it's going to be. And there's been, forks in the road throughout the last 10, 11 years where I was getting some, pressure from work to go, hey, you need to just go out a little bit, just go do this in store, do that in store. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to go back on my word. My word is my bond to my wife. And that is much more important to me than, anything I could ever do at Crown Heads, and that's just the way it is until anything else changes, which I don't foresee it changing. So, it's been tough. It hasn't always been easy, but, I don't regret it at all. I don't. I just I know what my values are, and I stick to them, and I know what as long as I always put God, wife, family, business. That's always been like put that in stone, and that's when I have to make a decision about something. I see how it lines up with those values, and then I make the decision.
There you go. I know your children are very young. Have you,
well, one of them is, but the other one isn't. He just called me. Yeah, my son's graduating college, actually.
Oh my gosh, really? Crazy.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
man, time flies. Unbelievable.
Yes, sir.
Has there been any thought or discussion or anything about the next generation of Huber being in the business? Like, this is such a family-oriented business, industry, right? Everyone talks about generations deep and stuff, so it's always something I'm curious about.
I don't know. Well, I can tell you that my son has no interest in it, never did express interest in it, which is fine. He's his own man. My daughter, AJ, she's 7, going to be 8, and she loves coming to the office, and she's like, I like the way this cigars smell, Daddy, and I'm going to design a hat for you, Daddy, and I'm going to,
that's awesome.
So who knows? It's like, I never want to influence my kids to do something. I want my message to my son, and it will be to my daughter, is be what you came here for. Like, whatever's calling you, go do that and be the best at that. So if somebody's calling you to be a lawyer, do that. If somebody's calling you to be a gardener, be the best gardener you could be, whatever. I mean, you just got to be what you came here for, and it's not for me to tell you what you came here for. You got to find that yourself. And that was a lesson I learned personally, I mean, God, no doubt. But I found it, fortunately.
My 7-year-old calls these gagars. That's what he's always called them. Gagars.
Nice.
And nice. One day, this was not too long ago, he said, Daddy, I want to be what you when you grow up. I want to do what you do. And I was like, in my day job, I'm a salesperson. So it's not very, my wife's a zookeeper. She's got the fun job. So he's like, I want to do what you guys do.
That is a cool
I want to be a zookeeper. And he's like, I want to be what you do, Daddy. And so it prompted me to ask this question. I'm like, so what is my son's perception of what I do? So this is comical. I love this. Like Jeremiah, I was like, what does Daddy do? What do I do? It's like, oh, you smoke cigars and talk to your friends.
That's my wife's perception of what I do. Oh yeah, I mean, we're 12 years into this thing, and my wife thinks that all I do is smoke cigars and post pictures on Instagram, and I'm like, there's a little bit more to it to grow a business from 66 stores to 1,200, and from X amount in revenue to X amount in revenue. You can't really do it by just smoking cigars and posting pictures on Instagram. So there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, for sure. It's kind of like, that old adage about the duck, how you just see the duck going like this, but underneath the water, his feet are going
paddling like hell. Yeah, 1,000 miles an hour. Yeah.
Yeah, man. That's how this business is. There's a lot that goes into it. And especially when you start doing it with 4 different factories and managing purchase orders and projections and timing of dropping this and that and cash flow and all of those things that go into it. It's at the end of the day, it is a business, but I love the business that we do. So, but it's a lot of work. There's no question about it. It's hard to convey to somebody, like even to my wife, unless you're here 24/7 watching what we do, you don't know what really goes into this business, but there's a lot of moving parts. And then when you add the layer on top of it, it is you're dealing with an agricultural product that has uncertainties and yields change and crops that change.
Broadleaf shortages. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you plug in this hole? Okay, we missed this last year. Why do we plug it in here? It's tough. But fortunately we have a great team. It's not just me, obviously. It's Mike, it's Adam, it's Miguel, it's our sales guys, it's our factory partners, our retail partners. So it takes a village for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Jon, that leads us to our last question of the conversation, of course, and that's always our curveball segment, which is brought to you by Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust. Fastballs or curveballs, it doesn't matter. Since the company's inception, Steve Saka has been knocking them out of the park. 8, count them up, 8 consecutive years on the consensus top 3. Congratulations to our friend, Mr. Steve Saka. So you kind of alluded to this. You actually took this, and you had no idea this was coming, Jon, so this is interesting. I actually had a question about hats. And you had mentioned, if you had said earlier in this conversation, you're like, if I hadn't gone in the cigar industry, I might be designing hats. So funnily enough, the curveball question isn't much of a curveball because it has to do with hats and creating them. So you've created some of my most beloved cigar swag hats. I think yours is probably the ones that I definitely wear the most frequently, if not almost exclusively. Nothing against any other cigar brands. I just love the way they fit, and they fit my big head, like we talked about, and everything. But if you had to create a hat for anything else, what would it be? And so I'll give you some examples. Would it be for a sports team? Would it be for a musical group? Would it be for an entity? A brand specifically?
I'm showing you this for a reason.
Oh goodness, here we go.
See this file? This file has everything that's either been designed, that's in production, that's been made, that's waiting to be made. This is what I've done. So yeah, I take it seriously. There's a guy actually, Brian Robertson, shout out to Brian. He is an avid collector of our hats, and he buys literally every drop that we have. And he sent me a message about a month ago and said, I now have over 100 in my collection of your hats. And I'm like, I couldn't even believe we did over 100, but you see that file.
Yeah, it's
something we've done.
Insane.
It's fun. I mean, I say that I would be designing hats if I wasn't doing this. Well, I also do design hats.
I was going to say.
So yeah, there's a bit of both. So what would I design? God, for what or for who? What was the question again?
So I mean, I get some examples. Like, there's no wrong answer here. You can answer it however you want to. I mentioned, like, would it be for a sports team, or would it be for a musical group, or maybe an entity? Like you said St. Jude a few minutes ago, talking about some of your family's charitable work when you were growing up, or
I would want to do it for my own, like my own brand, my own line, my own design, like like to be like the LVMH of headwear or something. I just to have your own label. That's what I would want to design. I wouldn't want to design for somebody else. Crown Heads, I guess, is our own label. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to do a hat for that company or that. I want to do a hat for this company, the vision I have for this brand. So I don't know if that answered the question adequately enough, but
I did have this follow-up because I've thought about minor league baseball is known for their fun, quirky theme nights, and they do all sorts of things across this country, which is stuff that Miguel and I really love and everything. And we've got massive collections of both Crowned Heads hats and sports teams, and yeah, hats are part of our life, all three of us. And given your relationship, with New Era and some of these hat companies and things like that, I mean, has a minor league team ever approached you? I mean, I would, if I'm going to put a bug in someone's ear. I mean, let's do that. Let's make that happen. Has a minor league team ever approached you to design something? Because I think you do a killer job.
Thank you. I mean, again, work with a great manufacturer, Derek, who's my rep for Dome. I mean, I met him by happenstance 6 years ago, and it was funny because a mutual friend sent me a hat, and I said, Max, who did this hat for you? And he said, oh, there's this company here, and here's the rep. And I'm like, I got to meet this guy. So one day Derek comes into the office, and he has this duffel bag of hats, and we sat down and started showing me all these hats, and he says, you can design everything here. I said, what do you mean? He goes, you can do the eyelet, you can do the crown, the undervisor, the button, the this, the that, 3D versus flat, snapback, fitted, what, you know, and I'm just like, what? I said, what's the MOQ? And he told me, and I'm just like, you and I are going to be good friends. And ever since that day, we have, I mean, there's not a day that goes by where I'm not texting Derek some new idea, but I'll just literally sketch it out and send it to him. And then his design guy will send it back to me, and I'll tweak it, and I'll change the eyelet, or I'll change the under, or whatever. So it's fun. It's a creative outlet for me. And again, the quality of the product, it goes back to the manufacturers, not me. So, you know, makes us look better than what we are, like I say. But it's just a creative outlet. And again, going back to what I said about the ethos of Crowned Heads, it was like, it has to be quality. So whether we're putting the Crowned Heads name on a cigar or a t-shirt or a hat, it's got to be quality. It can't just be like, oh, give me that blank and I'll stitch our name on it, and then we'll, you know, I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be, you know, on par with the best in that category.
Thank you from the depths of my heart. Thank you. I love it.
Yeah.
Jon, again, I'm finishing up the Le Patissier here, and we are finished with our conversation. I'm eternally grateful for this opportunity. It has meant so much to me. I don't think I'll ever properly be able to convey it to you. It's just been.
Hopefully, it won't be 592 before we do it again. So.
Absolutely. I would love to make this happen again. And there's so much I didn't get to, but I loved our conversation for all that it was. And thank you so much for sharing your journey, stories about your business, your family, your loves in life, all things, family, cigars, hats, and whatnot, and music, of course. It's just been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. So for everyone out there, yes, sir. Sorry, I keep cutting you off. I'm sorry. For everyone out there, we appreciate all the likes, shares, and comments. Keep them coming. We hope everyone has a wonderful Easter weekend. Happy Easter to everybody. And we thank you for all of your time and all those likes, shares, and comments. You can check out our YouTube channel, which is, of course, ELOSOFUMAR. Hit the subscribe button. If you are a fan of us on Facebook, hit the like button. That's where our calendar of upcoming guests, like Mr. Jon Huber this week, will be, as always. And you can always check us out mostly live. For those people that didn't figure this out, this is broadcasted on Sunday, but we recorded this ahead of time, and but mostly live every Sunday night. And this will be on Sunday as well. So we look forward to all of those likes, shares, and comments during that time. If you're listening to us wherever you listen to podcasts later on, whether that be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, or wherever you listen to podcasts, be sure you hit the download, subscribe, and review button. If you are a subscriber, do me a favor, hit unsubscribe, but don't forget to hit resubscribe, because that helps my numbers so that I can get great guests like Jon Huber whenever I want. So thank you so much for all of that. For everyone out there, I'm Bear Duplessis, live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star Studio of Azle, Texas. He's Jon Huber of Crowned Heads, and guess what, everybody? We'll see you next time.